shows we are live.
Yeah, okay, ma'am. So we are live on YouTube. So we may like formally start now.
Awesome. Thank you, Kamal. Thank you, Chaitanya. And a very good evening to everyone. I hope all of you are keeping safe and good. And a special welcome to our enthusiastic students at Shulini University, because I know you've all joined it in the midst of your examination. So, welcome. Friends, let me tell you, we are here today for a very special purpose. In this year of a lot of uncertainty and a lot of bad news, we have all felt lonely, worried, or just simply bored, almost like little children, some would say. So, when I heard of this amazing work called Priya's Mask, I was quite fascinated. It is an Indian animation. It's the first female superhero India has seen. Wow, right? How proud are we? And the voices have been lent by none other than Bollywood stars like Vidya Balan and Mrinal Thakur. Before we get into this whole session and talk about animation, technology, creativity, and the heady bundle that Priya's Mask is, I would like to welcome our especially special and the masterminds behind Priya's Mask. They're the creators of the show. Welcome, Ram.
Hello.
Ram Devneni, he's the director of Priya's Mask, and we have Shubhra Prakash, who is the
Hi.
writer.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.
We also have a very special guest for the day, Michael Rosenthal, who's the director at the US Embassy in Delhi. Welcome, Michael. It's a pleasure to have all of you here. Just to take everyone through the flow of the event, this is how we're going to run it. We will start with Ram and Shubhra as they tell us all about the creation of India's first female superhero. That will be followed by a 20-minute session on script writing. At the end of it, we will have a Q&A where students can unmute themselves and ask questions to our esteemed guests for the evening. As we get into the session, I'll first request our guests to take 2 minutes and just introduce themselves and talk to our students for 2 minutes each. Ram, can I begin with you?
Sure. Well, I'm a documentary filmmaker. I live in New York City, but I was born in India, South India, and spent a lot of time making films in India, and ended up creating this comic book series called Priya Shakti. And we just released the fourth edition with a short animated film.
Thank you, Ram. Can I move on to Michael? Michael, can we?
Sure. I'm Michael Rosenthal. I'm a diplomat for the United States government based in New Delhi. I'm the director of the office that covers Himachal Pradesh and 7 other states of North India, and we're really pleased to work with Ram and Shubhra on this project, and it's great to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Shubhra, can we have a few words from you?
Thank you, Nishta. Thanks, everyone, for having us. My name is Shubhra Prakash. I am the writer on Priya's Mask, which is the 4th in the series of comic books with Priya Shakti, and I'm here in New Delhi right now, and I'm very excited to chat with you guys about the process and how I've been involved. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Ram, over to you to take us on this beautiful journey.
Well, actually, I would love to. So this project was funded through the North India office of the US Embassy in India, and Michael and his team were instrumental in making it happen. This was an idea that was brewing, and I would love to get Michael to introduce the project, because his team was very instrumental in giving us the idea, motivating us, and supporting this throughout the whole process.
Excellent.
Oh, you have to unmute Michael.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Ron. Ron, thanks for kicking it back to me as well. So just in a quick minute, I'd love to introduce this project. It's really a pleasure to be here today and to be associated with this project, not just today, but going forward. And we've been working with Ram and the Radaplex teams for a few years now on a few different projects, and they've all turned out really well. So this one is no surprise, but it's really exciting to be in the middle of it. It's first time that I've been involved myself. I just started in this office this summer. So in general, though, it's just been for us in the embassy and the US government, part of our broader commitment to working on women's empowerment as well as on combating COVID-19, which are both very important issues. And this project really, I think, does a lot to address both of those subjects. And we couldn't be more pleased, as I said, with how Priya's Mask has turned out, the film and the augmented comic book. We've worked with Radaplex on two previous projects, the Priya's Mirror edition, which focused on acid attack survivors, and on the Priya and the Lost Girls series, which focused on trafficking in persons. Are also very important issues as well. Both of those received wide attention, spreading important messages across India and around the world, actually, through the coverage that they received, including at the Comic-Con conference in New Delhi in 2019 and the Jaipur Literature Festival in 2020. But beyond these collaborations, we, the North India office and the US government, have worked on a few other projects related to women, a number of other projects related to women's empowerment, including the She Vlogs project, which shares social media skills for female entrepreneurs, the Her Empowerment Grant and program, which teaches female artisans, small scale entrepreneurs, digital marketing to help spread their goods and services, and the Rajasthan Women's Entrepreneurship Program, which arranges mentors and training for female business entrepreneurs. So this is part of a broader commitment and series of initiatives that we've been working on together with Indian partners. And on the COVID pandemic, which, as Nishta mentioned, has affected all of us and changed the world for Indians, Americans, and everybody else, and made so many things so difficult, and is really the inspiring, although challenging, context of Priya's Mask, which is why it makes it so important, is also, of course, something important for the United States as part of the broader relationship between the United States and India that includes universities and laboratories and artists and so many other people that are collaborating across the Indo-Pacific, as we say. I'm from Los Angeles myself, the other side of the Indo-Pacific, and so grew up with lots of Indian American friends and Indian culture and restaurants and yoga and everything else. So it's a wide-ranging partnership between the United States and India. But during COVID, as with everything else, the United States and India have stood together. Our Centers for Disease Control has been sharing best practices with Indian counterparts on tracing and testing, has trained hundreds of Indian healthcare professionals. USAID has provided financial support to nearly 1,000 healthcare facilities in India and donated 200 ventilators to Indian facilities. And our private companies, as I mentioned, are working together on vaccines, which I think provide hope for so many of us in both countries and around the world. And it really brings together the scientific minds of both of our communities, just as our artistic minds are working together on so many great projects. So even though COVID is such a challenge for us individually and thus is the world, I think there's a lot of hope, and including from our two countries, the United States and India, to face it together, but needing to do it responsibly through the messages such as in Priya's Mask about wearing masks and giving help and healthcare professionals and everything like that. So again, we're just really honored to be part of this project. We're excited that it's going to be translated into different Indian languages, as Ram mentioned, being from South India. India is a diverse country, just like the United States. And it's important with messages like this to be able to reach so many different audiences. So that's important for us, as well as the educational curriculums being developed to help deal with the serious messages behind. It's a comic book and it's a superhero and it's exciting, but it's a serious matter as well. So again, I just want to say I'm really excited to be here today and to be associated with this project. And I would turn it back over to the creative minds that made it possible. So thank you again.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much. Ram, I think you need to unmute yourself.
No, I think that they need to unmute us.
Yeah,
because every time we mute, we lose the capability to unmute ourselves.
Sure, sure. So
I'll try to get that.
It's okay.
Thank you, Michael. Michael doesn't tell you that he's actually also Clark Kent. You know, if you take that glasses off, you'll reveal your superpower is super bad. And I know Michael has a busy schedule ahead of him, so he might be dropping off during the session, and I want to thank him for being a part of this. So Shubhra and I are going to go through a presentation of how we created Priya Shakti series, and also Priya's Mask, of course. And then afterwards is a special session. We'll go through the details of how to create a comic book script and how to do research, because I know this is geared towards journalism, how we do research in developing this whole project, because that's a very critical part of all of this, is the research element of it. So I'm just going to share my screen, and let me make it full screen. Oops, sorry. So this whole project, this is called Priya Shakti, and this whole project started for me back in 2012. As many of you know, there was this horrible gang rape that happened in Delhi on a bus. I was involved in the protests that were happening all around Delhi. As a documentary filmmaker, I was curious and wanted to research what the issues surrounding this was, because growing up in the US, I didn't realize India had an issue with gender violence because very little was being reported in the news about women's issues, and especially about rape. So I went to the protests, and there I met a Delhi police officer and asked him what he thought about what was happening around him, and particularly about what happened to her. And he said something that really got me started on this. He said, "No good girl walks home alone at night," implying that she either deserved it or she provoked the rape. And at that moment, I knew that the problem of gender violence was not a legal problem, but a cultural problem, and had to be approached from that point of view. So as a documentary filmmaker, I looked at documentaries originally as a possible format, but realized, at these protests, there were so many young people that were both men and women that were protesting. And I said I had to capture the spirit of the energy of what these young people were protesting for. And more importantly, they were my audience. And I knew if I made a documentary that no young person would watch it. It's just the case of documentaries. I mean, I'm generalizing, of course, but in general, I had to figure out another format to do it. So I started researching other formats, and then at the same time, I ended up interviewing many survivors, and not only survivors, but people working in NGOs, poets, philosophers, many different aspects. And talking with survivors, it became pretty clear to me and immediate that there was a stigma surrounding rape, that the punishment or the blame was put on them. And they continuously told me stories of them trying to get justice, trying to find, basically trying to get basic therapy and healing. But the stigma surrounding it kind of prevented them. They themselves would have to go to court and relive the whole rape scenario, and they had to justify why they were there to the court, to the police, and of course, even to their community. Their community would look down upon them as if they were to be blamed for what happened. And what I realized, talking with survivors, that what this caused was this kind of vicious circle where certain rapists would commit more rape because they knew they could get away with it. And then this is where the idea of creating a female character, and superhero didn't come yet, but creating a female character who is a rape survivor, can speak and especially challenge people's perceptions towards survivors. So here's the numbers. This is a few years ago, but according to India's National Crime Record Bureau, over 34,000 reported rapes in India, but only 21% of them make it to trial. So that's 21% that make it to trial. So you can imagine the numbers are astronomically much bigger, because there's many women that don't even report it. So I started looking at comic books as the way of reaching audiences. And I, of course, looked at American comics. Wonder Woman was one of them. And then there was, others like Power Girl. And what I immediately realized that Western comics, and even to an extent Eastern comics, really sort of sexualized women in comics. And this was, of course, not the approach we wanted to do with ours, is create a sexualized character. This was a very typical thing that you saw, because most of the illustrators and most of the creators of superhero comics were men, and they were really designed for teenagers, and especially young teenage boys who were at their peak of sexual fantasies and so forth. So I felt we had to take a completely new direction. And I started looking at the old Indian mythological comics that I grew up with back in the 80s. And there's one of them on the screen. And what I really found fascinating about these mythological comics is when I was growing up, that was how I learned about mythology and how I learned about India. I was living in a small farm town in South India. And I learned about the rest of Indian culture and everything else reading these mythological comics. And there was a very common motif that kept going on in all these comics, and to an extent in mythology. The motif was that a villager would often get into some kind of problem or issue and would call upon the gods for help. And the gods would come and give their assistance. But in more cases, they would actually cause more problems and cause big wars and so on. And in reality, it was the villager that had to take the initiative and really try to solve their own problems. And I found that very fascinating to use as a structure for this series. And this led to the creation of Priya. And she was, at first she was not labeled a superhero. She was just a regular villager who called upon the Hindu gods for help. And eventually she had to figure out it was herself that had to solve this problem. At a certain point in the comic, and it's a very typical thing that happens with rape survivors. They're thrown out of their village, and in the comic, she's living in the jungle, and living outside of her village, and she's being stalked by a tiger. And at one point, she climbs down from the tree, looks the tiger in the eye, and speaks a very powerful mantra, and which is up on the screen. And through that mantra, the tiger becomes her friend. So basically, there's a metaphor. Priya is confronting her fears, which I always found was the core value of what a superhero needs to do in order to transition to the next stage in their powers. And she turns the tiger from fear into Shakti or power. And she rides the tiger back into the village, speaks this powerful mantra, and starts transforming people. And it becomes almost like a Gandhi-esque kind of journey where people start following her, almost like the Salt Walk. In fact, the Salt Walk was what inspired me, where they would follow her around India, trying to challenge people's perceptions towards women and survivors. And that's sort of where the nucleus of this whole project started. I mean, that's where the story ends with the first one. So this eventually led us, and then I haven't gotten to the point of launching it yet. So one of the unique things we started doing all over India is we started creating street murals and eventually exhibitions, but street art, because that's a very popular thing to do in India, is use street art as a way of talking about social issues. And obviously the image of Priya on a tiger is very representative of the Hindu goddess Durga on a tiger. So people would always see this art being created, and they didn't really exactly know it was Durga or not Durga. It was kind of in question, but they always said it was a very strong, empowered woman. And the unique thing about these murals that you see in the comic is it uses augmented reality. So with an app, you can scan those images and the walls come to life. And I'm gonna actually show you a video of what I mean. So, oh, sorry. So we eventually, that's an example of some of the murals we've done. So eventually launched the comic in 2014, December at the Mumbai Comic Con, and immediately it was a huge hit. Now we have over 1,000 news stories written about it, and about 26 million views of the comic in all its iterations all over the world. Soon after, the UN Women named it a gender equality champion. This was years before they actually recognized Wonder Woman as a female superhero. So it really galvanized and got people very excited about the possibilities. This eventually led to the next chapter, which is Priya's Mirror, which dealt with acid attacks. And that was funded through the World Bank. And then we released recently the third chapter, December 2019, Priya and the Lost Girls, which dealt with sex trafficking. And all of these involved very critical methodology that I use from documentary films and journalism. There's extensive interviews that I do with survivors. And even with Priya and the Lost Girls, we worked with a local NGO, and we went to Sonagachi in Kolkata and interviewed women who were working in the brothels in Sonagachi. And with Priya's Mirror, I worked with many acid attack organizations in India and in Colombia and other countries. And the survivors became characters in the story. Through the AR, we were also able to embed their video stories into the comic book. So that was a strong element of this. And many of them took, eventually became spokespeople and went on media like Al Jazeera and others talking about the comic and talking about their experiences. And there was a basic philosophy: the more survivors were open in public and willing to share their stories and really challenge people's perceptions about them, it was important to get them out there and to allow them to share their voices, you know. So I'm going to give this over to Shubhra and let her talk about the creation of Priya's mask.
Yeah, so can everyone hear me? Am I audible? Yeah, okay, great. So Priya's mask, when we first started to work on the story, I thought about the situation we were in. Obviously, the pandemic was roaring. We had already received a lot of information, a lot of news about what was going on in all parts of the world. In fact, we were inundated with news every day. All kinds of statistics were flowing in, all kinds of details of what kind of restrictions we had to follow. At this time, then the urge was to go inward and to just kind of, sit with your solitude. But then as I started to explore more and more of that story, I started to also think about those who did not have the opportunity to do that, the people that had to go out there, that had to go out and work, that have to keep the world moving by doing their duties, whether they were cleaners or whether they were nurses. Essential workers soon became the people that I wanted to talk about through this comic book. And the beginning was, like I said, through solitude. So I tried to focus on the part of the population that I wasn't hearing about. I wasn't hearing much about how children were coping. I was hearing more about how people were suffering. So these two factors kind of started the story creating process for me. And that's how Priya's mask came to be, that it was going to show a relationship between a daughter and her mother, and what would it take from us to take it seriously, the situation, if a mother is sacrificing her time with her daughter so that she can make sure everyone else is safe? Does that resonate with us more than, oh, this is a person, a part of a statistics that has to go to work so that we can keep doing what we're doing? If we were able to communicate as a story the bond between a mother and a daughter, and what does that do when you know that she can't be with her daughter because she has to do the work, and that's indirectly connected with us keeping ourselves safe. So that was kind of sort of where we started, and that is why we wanted to use a story and a particular relationship to communicate the the urgency and the importance of why we are asking everyone to take that personal responsibility and practice social distancing and wear their masks. And I mean, Ram will tell you, when we started, we didn't know that it would be relevant by the end of the year, but here we are. So um, that's kind of the Priya's mask overview.
Yeah, I mean, what happened was the U.S. Embassy, the North India office, approached me and said there's a grant that we have out there focused on disinformation, especially that's what's propagating online, and more particular what's happening on WhatsApp, blaming minority groups, minority religions in India for the virus and the spreading of the virus, and especially poor people as well. And we said we would love to apply, and we were fortunate to get it. And that started the development of the story. One of the unique things that I want to emphasize that Shubhra did, and which the whole team did, there was many others as well, which I'll mention in the next slide, is we decided to not only focus on, of course, the best practices and challenging the disinformation. We also felt that this comic book is a historical document. Like if you look at the Spanish flu of the 1920s, and you look at I researched this and I cannot find any creative work about the Spanish flu, even though it killed more people than World War I did, you know? So I was just fascinated, like there was nothing telling us about it. And even in this COVID days, right? Like no one knows anything about the Spanish flu. And I thought there must be a creative way of telling this, especially when the whole creative industry all around the world was shut down. There's no movies being made, there's no art, nothing's being created, no performances except online, I guess. So the comic book deals with many topics besides the COVID-19. Obviously, what you see on the screen, we focused on the immigration issues that were happening in India, probably the biggest mass migration of people since separation, back in the end of independence happened during this time. We of course talk about essential workers, but we also talk about later in the comic, this relationship with the Burqa Avenger, who's Pakistan's female superhero, and which we'll show a little bit later. And that was very important to talk about as well, because the virus, of course, it doesn't respect borders, doesn't care if you're Pakistani or Indian. It started in a different country and spread all over the world. So these were all these topics that were being talked. And there's even an environmental issue in this as well, because there's a few panels focused on the fact that the air in India, and in particular Delhi, was so clean that animals that never came, that were birds that haven't been seen for decades, have returned because of the air was so clean, and things like that. And then Shubhra, maybe we can talk about the film, and we'll show them the 2-minute film that we produced as well.
Yes, we've been very fortunate to have, known, established actors and personalities, both from Bollywood and Hollywood, who have given voices to our characters. I mean, as a writer, you can only dream that, whatever you have written can also be seen as a short film. And so this is what we have. We had Vidya Balan giving the voice of Sahas, the tigress. Rosanna Arquette did that for the English version. We have Mrinal Thakur, she did the voice for Priya, and lovely Sarah Kabir did the voice for Meena. And this was just something that they did, and they were very generous with their time, with their efforts, and it just blew us away. And I would love for you to see the film.
And we'll show it. I mean, what's unique about this film is obviously it's an animated film and it's about 2 minutes, but we were able to do this in roughly 3 months,
right,
with teams all over the world, in India, in Mumbai, the producers Tanvi Gandhi, Indrani Ray, Monica Samanti, who's in DC. We're all part of this. Everyone was working remote. Even the recording of the voiceovers were remote, using Zoom and local small, like iPhones and so on. So none of us actually physically met each other while creating this. And that I found was like, a representation of the times we're living in. So let me show the film and then we'll keep going. I have to just unshare this and get the next one up. Sorry.
Mhm.
Uh,
I wish we could go back in time, Ma. We used to go to the park together and play, but now I barely see you.
Don't be afraid. I am Priya, your friend, and this is Sahas.
Why are you sad, Meena?
I miss my friends. I have no one to tell my feelings to.
Come on, let's go on a journey. Have you ever been on a flying tiger? Sometimes we have to be strong, so those who love us can also be strong.
That's my friend Leena's kite.
Let's say hi to your friend.
Hi. That's my Ma. She works as a nurse here.
Your ma has sacrificed her time with you to take care of those who need help because of the virus. I am sure she misses you too, Meena. But right now, she is the hope these patients need.
Priya, we need to stand together and bring about the change we want to see.
That's how we can beat the virus.
Continue to wear a mask for your safety and mine.
So,
I was just gonna say one more thing about the story itself. That line that Meena says, "I have no one to tell my feelings to," is an actual line that we heard from Ram's niece, and that's what kind of started this whole thing of, yes, we should talk about children, because that's a deep line. You would never imagine a child say something like that. I have no one to tell my feelings to. You hear something like that and you think, wow, I mean, you get taken aback from it. How do you even comprehend it? But that's the truth. At that point in a child's development, you rely on your friends. You're starting to share things that you wouldn't share with your parents, and if that stops, because of all the things that you have to do now immediately, then what do you do with those feelings? So that's why I wanted to add that in there, and I just wanted to point that out, that was one of the instrumental things that even created the character of Meena.
So that's the Burqa Avenger that's on the right side or your left. And we launched it December 2nd, and the comic and the film was a huge success, we believe. A lot of downloads, about 700,000 views of the film on YouTube, and many more on all the various sites like BBC and so on. And the Washington Post gave us this really great blurb. And I hope Dr. Fauci in DC gets a copy of it as well. We're trying to get it to him. And it was very fortunate also to be working with this team in Pakistan in creating it. And I really have to give credit to the State Department and the US Embassy for arranging that, because I was a big fan of the Burqa Avenger for a while. She's Pakistan's female superhero. And we never thought about doing a partnership. And they worked with the Burqa Avenger in their team in Pakistan, and they suggested we connect them. And I joked around and said, the State Department's acting like Wonder Woman, America's superhero, and connecting Pakistan and India. And maybe this might lead to a peace treaty between India and Pakistan through Wonder Woman, And the strange part is Linda Carter, who played Wonder Woman in the 1970s, fell in love with the story and started sharing it on her social media. So we drew this picture of Wonder Woman, Linda Carter from the 1970s on this image. One of the cool things that Shubhra actually developed. Shubhra, can you talk a little bit about this and something that anyone here
yeah.
can do?
If you are on Facebook Messenger or Instagram and you use filters, this is a filter that we created, which is of a mask, and it you don't see it in here because it's not really a video, but while you wear it, it changes colors, and I created this using Spark AR, because I do those things sometimes as well. So that's an augmented reality, because we have been doing augmented reality with, that was kind of one of the first things we did. Actually, Priya Shakti, the first comic book, was one of the first comic books ever to use augmented reality. So in the spirit of this, I said, I wanted to explore that. And I think, why not wear a mask when you're on your Messenger or Instagram and motivate other people to put that in your story? It seems like some people can use a reminder, and why not? It's a fun way. So we created that, and you can go in there, look for Power of Priya, which is our handle, and you'll be able to take a photo of yourself and
video.
just
Wow.
or video, and send it to us, tag us. It was created using Spark AR, which is a free technology for you to use if you'd like to create your own filters. So yeah.
Yep, and that's it for the presentation part. We'll go into later on the discussion about creating the comic book scripts and things like that.
We're very excited, and I really hope that we can interact with the students, because I would love to ask questions and kind of do that if that's possible, or if they could respond on the chat, because I'm hoping that that's possible with the workshop. So
yeah.
Of course. Students, please feel free to send in your questions on the chat, and of course we'll also allow them to unmute themselves once you have made a presentation.
Right.
We can, we'll definitely have them have a chat with you.
Right.
Awesome.
So thank you so much. I love your mask, Ram. Amazing. I want that.
New filter on Snapchat on Zoom. You can take any different kinds of effects and things like that. It's pretty cool. This is one of my favorites. So, no, but this is the new use of AR is social media. I think it's has evolved immensely since we started in 2013. So yeah, very exciting stuff.
It's before you needed devices to see it. Now whatever device you have allows you to experience it, and that's kind of, and I'm sure in journalism itself there are so many things that are yet to be explored using augmented reality.
Yeah.
Totally.
I mean, the most basic thing that everyone has done is, of course, you see it with Shubhra, is a virtual backgrounds. That's AR, where you basically replace the background with something else.
Yeah.
What I found most fascinating was the way you have collaborated, for in terms of cultures, bringing in Pakistani burqa, and also the way you've used AR and not to miss the whole social aspect of it. So I'd love for you to talk to our students about, how this ideation happens. How do you get an idea, or how do you know that this is the idea you want to run with? So it'll be great if any one of you could speak about it.
Ram should speak about it, because I remember in the beginning he was doing, there was like before the comic book, there were things that he was exploring, and that was very interesting for me to watch, and how he came to the comic book. Ram's going to talk about it. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it comes from my documentary experience of doing extensive research and understanding the subjects and the issues. I think that really played a lot into the beginning of the comic series. I mean, even into this one. I mean, there was challenges, of course, with Priya's mask. There was limited research we could do. We've, of course, got stories from family members who were doctors and what they've experienced, and a lot of stuff from the CDC guidelines, and then in the beginning, the embassy and the State Department had information about all this disinformation that was being propagated on WhatsApp and so on, and that all it got incorporated into the comic as well. So that there was that level of research for this one, not as extensive as the previous ones, because in the previous ones I was able to sit down and do interviews with survivors and get very long stories with them. But that's the kind of methodology I recommend, even creating anything that deals with social issues. You have to. It's a different motivation than just creating a play or a movie where you do interviews to help write a story. Our goal with our project is to have the people that we interview be a part of the story, as opposed to being inspired by. They become a part of it, and I think that's a very unique methodology of really trying to address social issues creatively.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think that's something that needs to come back in focus. The primary research, which I think all of us grew with, that's kind of fading because the amount of information available virtually. I
Right.
think that's pretty key to any kind of creation.
I mean, I really do emphasize like sitting down and talking with subjects. That's again, like I'll give you one example, which totally defined the series. When I interviewed one of the gang rape survivors back in 2013, she was still being challenged and being terrorized by the perpetrators and their families. So she was in the village or near the village where it happened, and I had a chance to sit down and interview her. And when she came in with this police officer, a local police officer, and he was carrying an AK-47 or something like that. And so he, even 2 years after the rape had happened, she was still being guarded by a cop. And he was in another room while I was interviewing her. And I realized, she's like maybe 20 or something at that time, and that this is what she's going to have to live with for the rest of her life. Like, she can't go to a dance, she can't go on a date, she can't go to the shopping mall without a police officer following her with this semi-automatic machine gun. That I would have never ever experienced or known about had I done research online or gone and looked through papers or whatever else. That was something visceral that you had to experience yourself, and I think that's very important when you when you do the research.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, the bit about street art, our students they actually do it on campus as well. It's quite amazing what they do.
Well,
So can you also?
mural eventually, when we got up to the university.
Yes, yeah, exactly. That's something you're missing out on. But again, do you think street art is still here to stay? Is something somebody has asked me to check with you.
I mean, there is of course public art, which people do commission for, and of course our process when we create it is we get commissioned, and we work locally with the community, because our goal is to have the mural up for many years, not just for like a couple weeks. And then there's street art, which is very subversive, and that is not always legal. So people put murals up or paintings or things like that. There's that aspect, and that aspect has become much more popular than the professional art. So you see a lot of murals being and stencils and things like that being put all over India, and possibly I mean, I'm not of course recommending illegal activity, but you can see that the art that's being put up is much more fascinating than just a blank wall. Some of that art actually has beautifies some of this stuff if done really well. And I mean, the most classic example is Bansky. Now, if you see his art, all of his art is illegal, first off. But if someone puts if Bansky puts his art up on a wall, the first thing the owner of that shop does is he basically starts auctioning the wall, because the wall now has gone from like no value to a wall that basically like people spit on or whatever, to now worth $1 million. So street art is it can be huge if done well.
Absolutely. So I'll actually take a couple of questions since we have them, and then maybe we can move on to the session with on script writing, right?
Yeah.
Vipin wants to know if there are any plans to convert the series into a feature film.
Well, Tanvi and Indrani and Monica and others, we're working on that right now. I mean, the short animated film has come to our realization that there's a lot of potential for
Right.
this, and working with really talented artists, and not only illustrators, but of course the actors, and bringing it to life. And when you make a short animated film or an animated film, it reaches an entirely bigger demographic than a comic book.
Right.
More people read more people watch the Marvel and DC films than they actually read the comic
Read the
books.
comic books. Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's
there's a lot of
absolutely.
potential for that.
And also, questions coming in about, converting them into regional languages. And
Yeah.
I would also like you to just highlight, because we have students with us, so the growing need for more regional languages, more regional content.
Yeah.
That's something that they should be pursuing. So that's something.
I do want to add that that's true about the film. Also, the comic book is becoming sort of a force in the literary terms, using the comic book to kind of sort of engage students, in language learning and all of that. And that ties into your regional language thing, because at the end of the day, if they have that book, which has the visuals, it's a comic book, but really good, comprehension for them to explore and to use, that becomes a great tool, in its own way. So I think,
I mean, the film is available in English and Hindi. There's also a Hindi learning video where you can actually read the Hindi text, and it helps you do comprehension. And of course, the North India office and the RELO, which is the Regional English Language Office, is helping us create an English curriculum for students in India and abroad. And then it's available in English. This is the comic. English, Hindi, Malayalam, Kannada, Telugu, Tamil, Spanish, French, Italian, and Chinese as well. Mandarin.
Portuguese too, also. Yeah.
And Portuguese as well.
Yeah.
Too.
And
Brazilian Portuguese.
yeah, we had a school print the comic on their own, like 2 copies, and read it with their kids and send us a video on social media. So it definitely inspired them to, kind of naturally go towards language, studying and all of that. So that was very, very, very great for us to even see.
Yeah, and all the materials are free on our website.
Yeah.
And eventually on the North India's Regional English Language Office website as well, which people can download all the different languages, see the videos for free, and the school guides as well for free.
Amazing. That's a lot of work. There's another question from Nikita. She wants to know, how do you see this story building into the needs of the reader?
Needs of the what?
Reader.
A reader. Okay.
So there are different kinds of readers. If we are talking about young adults, how does that build into them? I think that's what you mean in the question. Basically, the story is about empathy. It's about understanding the situation you're in and understanding beyond yourselves, because it starts with a little girl, but then it kind of reaches out to everybody else, and how this little girl and their mother can sustain their connection while this pandemic is looming above all of our heads. And this is what Priya helps with. So I feel that there's something unique about Priya, and that she has a tiger that she flies on, but she relies on a very simple power, which is the power to speak your truth, and to also be able to motivate people to empathize. And that is something that I think we can all understand. If there is someone who tells you that you can take this step, you can speak up, and I'm right by your side, that's what I think she does.
I mean, I think what's so apparent about COVID-19 and the pandemic and the lockdown is it's affecting everyone universally all over the globe. I mean, the previous comics were much focused on gender violence and focused on how society treats survivors. But with the COVID-19, it is universally affecting everyone in some way. And I always say this, Priya is a survivor. She's not a victim of gender violence because she took what happened to her and used it to transform herself and her community and society. And the big question we all need to ask ourselves, because it's affecting all of us, is are you going to be a survivor of this pandemic or are you going to be a victim of it? Like, what are you going to do? Is the pandemic going to define you or are you going to define the pandemic? Because it will eventually go away, but the repercussions are something we'll have to deal with for many years to come. And that's where the idea of survivor is more critical than ever.
Yeah, and that could possibly be one of the themes in the coming years, because this is going to impact, I think, at least the next generation, if not more.
Right.
We have Nikita. Nikita, do you want to unmute yourself and ask a question? Will that be possible for her, Chaitanya? Can you just confirm to me?
Good evening, ma'am.
Yeah,
Good
hi.
evening, sir.
Hello.
Yeah, hi. So I wanted to ask you, who got you started in doing a comic series, and what do you hope to accomplish with your comic?
Well, I never made comics until I started Priya Shakti. So I always give myself as an example of someone who had no experience and no talent in this medium, and then eventually creating something that was success. So that should give you enable you and feel that you can do it as well. It is a lot of work, a lot of research, and a very cooperative process in doing this. So that really got me started. I always emphasize research, and when we did the first comic, I spent a year researching test marketing. I use the word test marketing. It's a marketing term, but what I did is I did test groups with the artwork and the AR with teenagers in Mumbai and Delhi and other cities, and got their feedback and made adjustments, which is a very untypical thing when you create art, is getting that feedback, which I felt was important because we're trying to create social activist art. So this was a whole process and methodology that was kind of being developed as we were doing it. I mean, I think by this Priya's Mask, we've got it down pretty strong. That's one of the reasons we were able to produce this in such a short period of time. So I think that's important. Our goal, hopefully, with this series, is to really challenge people's perceptions of women, create a female superhero that younger people can identify with, and also this series is really targeted, not so much Priya's Mask, but the previous ones, towards teenage boys, because teenage boys are the ones who predominantly read comics, and we wanted to give them another image, another character that they could identify with, that challenges their perceptions of women at that age, because teenagers at that age are, of course, going through many things. They're understanding gender issues, they're understanding sexuality, they're understanding a lot of stuff, and it's important that they have some kind of alternative narratives that they can read.
We also have Om Kumar. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask the question?
Good evening, sir. Good evening, ma'am.
Hi.
So my question is, what is a superpower?
Her superpower is the power of persuasion, which is actually, I believe, the most powerful power that anyone can have. I mean, Superman obviously can blow down buildings and destroy planets and everything like that. And Wonder Woman has her lasso and all these other things, gadgets.
Make you speak the truth.
Right. But the most powerful power that anyone can have is to put an idea into someone's head and make them take control of that idea and make it their own and use it to change and transform their lives. That I always felt is the most powerful power anyone can do is to inspire and to put that inception. And I use the word that in the inception from that movie Inception because when I saw that movie, I said, wow, that's pretty much what Priya is doing. She's putting an idea into someone's head. And throughout all the chapters, Priya never forces, even the survivors or anyone else, never forces anyone to do anything.
Or
Rather,
solves anything, or solves anything for anyone.
She doesn't solve or force anyone to do anything. Rather, she puts the ideas into people's heads and they themselves become the catalyst for change, in themselves and in their community. That I think is a very unique approach to superhero comics,
Thank you, sir. That would be all.
Thank
Thank you. Actually, I would like to ask Michael if he, what was some of his favorite comics when he was growing up reading, if you don't mind sharing some of your thoughts on like your superheroes. Actually, Michael, I want to hear your Hindi too. I know you're a fluent Hindi speaker too.
हाँ, क्या आपको हिंदी आते हैं? रामजी? आप शायद तेलुगु वाले हैं.
नहीं आती उनको हिंदी.
You're Telugu, maybe?
No,
Ram?
I have to get a translator for all of this. Sorry.
I think his.
Yeah. So I was a superhero boy, I guess. But yeah, this is an amazing, really, project. And thanks for just learning all the background to this has been fascinating and inspiring for me as well. Thank you both, Ram and Shubhra.
Thank you.
Great. We also have Anushka. Anushka, do you want to ask your question? Anushka, are you there? I can see her. Yeah. We can't hear you, Anushka.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, what was the most difficult thing you faced while breaking into the comic industry?
Oh, wow. Well, I kind of see myself on the edges of the comic book industry. We actually do the Comic Cons and present at them, but the fact that our projects are for free, we're not technically part of the industry. So like we're not there to make projects to create revenue and things like that. Our revenue base comes from other things, from grants and foundations and so on. I think the question you might be asking also is it difficult for women to break into the comic book industry, not only in India, but in the US? That has changed dramatically since the last decade. There has been big initiatives to really encourage more illustrators and women-based stories in not only in independent comics, but in Marvel and DC. There's a huge focus on that. Even the films that are being produced are they're making sure there's good representation. Shubhra, if you want to.
Wonder Woman is directed by a woman. The latest installation is being directed by a woman. So that's the biggest comic book character coming to the screen near you, hopefully, sometime soon. So that's directed by a woman. So if that can motivate you, that would be, the thing to go to.
And we have Shubhra here. She's created Priya's mask as well. So you're an inspiration as well, Shubhra.
Thank you. There have been women involved in this project throughout, and I think that I think that's great that Ram has done that actually as a creator, brought on more women. So it's something that you do even as a creator, take that responsibility on and encourage, because we all obviously know that there has been a lack of representation. So this is really good, and I feel proud to be part of the team. Thank you.
So I also actually am the editor of techthirsty.com, where again we focus on women in tech, and we're also an all-women's team, so it's absolutely doable.
Shubhra is your next subject right there.
Absolutely.
Oh man. Yeah. Cool. This is great. Glad to answer all the questions. Excited to get into the workshop.
So we do have a couple of questions, one or two. Let's take them and then we move on to the session.
Cool.
Nikita, why don't you go ahead?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, as an aspiring artist, I wanted to know in what ways do I bring together elements in comic to communicate my perspective as an artist? We know the
So,
story in mind, but how do we communicate in the right way?
Yeah.
oh,
So,
that's great. I like it.
good question. I mean, maybe Shubhra can maybe talk about how we went about working with illustrators in conceptualizing and bringing the characters to life, because there was a lot of collaboration between the writers and the illustrators and the animators.
Yeah,
Shubhra?
that's for sure. But I think that, I mean, this question is ideal for what we will show in the workshop. And how do you take an idea and how do you create a comic book? This is essentially what we're doing in the workshop. So, Nikita, you should wait till then. There's so many tools, but there's definitely what Ram said is the collaboration is a big part of it, because this is a medium where visual narrative, and now because of the short film also, like the actors who gave their voices, all of that came together. So there were that many dimensions to one story, then that became bigger. But if you want to know how, then you should, I'm like a promoter for this workshop right now. But basically that will answer it for you. Okay.
Superb, superb. Okay, Om has his last question. Om, please go ahead, and then we move on to the session.
Well, how realistic is the background that is going around Priya? So, do we get to see a little darkness which is in our society, or is it purely kids story?
Well, Priya's mask is focused on. I'll say this: there's something really remarkable about comics, because comics are very subversive, and I love that word subversive, because when you look at a comic, and it's beautifully drawn, there's great stories and pages flip and so on, but the best comics go deeper into stories and go into deeper issues. So in the case of our comics, you just want to possess these beautiful artifacts, right? But when you start reading it, you realize, holy cow, this is about a woman who is a rape survivor, and she's dealing with acid attacks and things like that. So yes, you can go into deeper and darker subject matters, but the subversive nature of comics is you have to also make them appealing visually to the eyes, so that the audience comes to it and is drawn to it. If you can't reach both those levels of good storytelling and beautiful art, then it's going to fail.
I hope that answers your question, Om. So I think we can now move. Okay, I'm so sorry. There's one last question. Can we take that?
Yeah.
Khushi, please go ahead.
She's unmuted. Yeah, there she.
Go ahead, Khushi.
Maybe you can read the question.
Yeah.
Hello, hello. Good evening, sir. Good evening, ma'am. Ma'am, I want to ask how much time it took and did you animate in After Effects or Illustrator?
Sorry. Yeah, I didn't animate it. I'm the writer. The animation was
Okay.
done by Sid, Finney, and Neda Kazamifer, and Ram will tell you about
Yeah,
it.
the comic book was created in Photoshop. So the drawings were all on Photoshop using iPad, and the animation was I forgot what the animation software. It wasn't After Effects or Premiere or anything like that. It was a specific animation software that the animators used to create that. And basically the whole process. So we got the grant in August, and basically we released it December 2nd. So this includes everything: the marketing, the producing, the production, the comic. So that was pretty fast, 3 months, maybe less than 3 months to do everything. Normally it would take much longer than that. So
That's partially the collaboration, I would assume, is one of the key reasons why you were able to do that.
yeah. everyone was very committed to this. And I mean, we also knew that we had to get this out soon because people's perceptions of the virus were changing faster than the virus itself. So the movie we made and started in August would have been so different than if we started back in February, you know.
Right.
Like the things were just evolving, and even now, December, going into the holidays, people's perceptions of the virus has also dramatically changed as well.
That's right. Great. Shubhra, Ram, we'd really love to have you take us through the entire journey. And I think also you could probably take the questions around what kind of systems can be used, some free tools or some more professional tools, if you can also, because I think there were a lot of questions around that. So if you can do that.
How do we transition to the workshop? Is that?
Do you want us to do that? Do you want us to?
We just keep going now to the workshop part
Yes,
of it, or?
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, Michael, you're more than welcome to stay, but this, if you have other stuff to do, please, you can drop off, and we'll go right into the workshop.
Thank you, Michael. I'd just like to say thank you for joining Shulini University, and this work that you're doing. I think it's great, the effort your team has put in. So thank you, and we hope to see you in campus very, very soon.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Nisha, for hosting me or allowing me to join in today, and Ram and Shubhra for educating me. This is a really great opportunity, and I look forward to hopefully meeting the students in person. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Sure. Okay, I'm going to share the screen. So let's bring this.
I'd just like to tell our students that Ram has promised to go through 3 of the scripts that we send him. So guys, after this session, you can work on some scripts, send it to communications@shuliniuniversity.com, and we'll make sure that Ram has a look-see.
Yes, I'll give you some honest feedback on it.
Please. Yes,
and I totally understand this is the beginning for the process, so I'll be also very kind. So, so I have a bigger workshop on how to create comics, but we're going to focus on the storytelling aspect of it because usually these classes take a long time to go through, and there's also involvement of the students. I always, I show this slide because I think this is the perfect slide on how to create a story, on how to write a comic. Obviously, this is a comic strip, and it required very little talent amongst the creator to create it. It's a stick figure comic, but within these 3 panels that you see on the screen is basically the basic structure of all storytelling, whether it's Star Wars or a big Bollywood film or a comic book. So what you have is in the first panel or the first part of the story is the character is introduced and you learn a little bit about their personality. In this case, the character is a stick figure. It says, "Hey, everybody." And so, it's a very funny and comical character. The middle of the story or the middle of the the panel is we're introduced to the problems, conflicts that they face. So you see it, this person is dealing with the fact that it's snowing. And for a panel that's a comic book that's drawn on white paper, white snow is the adversary. And then the third is how the character resolves or deals with the problem. So here it says, makes a funny joke, which makes a nice change from my normal white background. So that's basically your structure of all storytelling is three-act structure. And this guy does it. I'm going to use a very popular comic book and a graphic novel called Persepolis, which is also made into a film, to really talk about the principles of comic storybook telling. So number 1, you have to have a great story, which we'll talk about. Uniform style, that's very critical when creating a comic book or a graphic novel, that the artwork is consistent for the audience to understand. Characters are defined with only a few lines. You can go into more detailed comics, but The more detail you get into comics, the longer it takes to draw. And Persepolis is a great example of simplicity, as you can see on the screen. Personalities have to come out. You know, the character is that you draw is a real person, even though it's drawn. They have to come out. The personalities have to be shown. And I'll show you examples of that. First panel defines the character and the environment, which I showed. Middle panel goes into the issues and the story. And the last panel goes into how the character will or will not deal with it. So I'm going to, this is a one page from Persepolis. And this one deals with these girls that are in school, including Persepolis. And the first panel, she talks about that she's a very young girl in the 1980s. And she's been asked to take photo day. And this happened right around the time of the Iranian Revolution. No, all of a sudden, everyone is basically have to look alike. All girls have to dress the same. They have to wear the hijab. But what's very unique is the illustrator was able to distinguish personalities with very few lines. So just the way the hair is drawn, the eyes, the nose, whatever, you understand, you can tell which one is which. And there's personalities that come out of that. So now the middle, we learn about the issues. It's the Islamic Revolution, 1979 revolution. All of a sudden the kids have to wear hijabs and they're confused by this. They never had to wear it before. And what do kids do when they're giving something that they don't understand? That's where the last panel explains it. They kind of goof off. They use the hijab as a jump rope, as a lasso, and other things like that. And this is the resolution. Within one page, you have the whole story structure being told. Introduce the characters, the issues, and how they as children would deal with these issues. So I'm going to turn this over to Shubhra to talk about the hero's journey.
Okay, guys. So the hero's journey is sort of, if you look at any story that is very well known in the last few decades, okay, anything starting from Star Wars to Harry Potter, there is a certain map that most stories follow. And the gentleman here whose photo I have used, if you are a student of philosophy or student of literature, you may have run into him, and his name is Joseph Campbell. His work, The Hero with 1,000 Faces, is one of his books, along with The Power of Myth, where they talk about who this hero is that we as human beings feel so attached to, whose story we want to know, who we look for in every story. We want that one person to carry out this journey and take us to the final point. So this is how you can use this map to kind of go through your story. And this is based on Joseph Campbell's research of stories of different cultures and religions around the world. He has found a pattern in all of those stories. And this is that pattern, very finely distilled for you. There are many details to this pattern, but in this particular pattern, I'll just walk you through. A hero has a call to adventure. Something is provoking him to go out towards something that he does not know at the beginning. Then there are helpers, there is a supernatural aid, there is a guardian who comes in. But the most important thing you will find in this diagram, which you can learn from in your story, is the division of the known world and the unknown world, the conscious world and the subconscious world. And superheroes almost always have to overcome something in their subconscious, something within themselves, in their inner world, to actually go do something in the outer world. To overcome a conflict in the outer world, you must overcome a conflict that is inside you. Sounds very philosophical, but this is at the center of most stories that have to do with heroes going on an adventure. If you look at the bottom of this diagram, you will see abyss, death, and rebirth. This is the turning point. A hero comes to a place where they have to shed their part of their self and transform into a new person. Okay, so that transformation is an example of something that you can show in your story. Okay, that transformation then leads them to complete this cycle. And I've basically swam past a lot of this and I have not gone into details, but I'm giving you this as an example that you should look for this kind of a sort of it is sort of a mirror, you know. It is an understanding of what does it mean for a comic book or a superhero to become a hero. You have to go through a transformation, and almost always you have to enter your unknown world, your subconscious world. There is an inner conflict that you will overcome before you get in and truly become the superhero. Okay, so Peter Parker in Spider-Man has all the gadgets. He's able to climb the walls, but it is only when his uncle is hurt that he overcomes the inner pain to do good. Till before then, he is amused by all the powers he has. He's amused by being able to climb the walls, being able to use the web. He doesn't think anything of it. It is only when a personal inner pain causes him to see that the world is a bigger place and I play a role in it. That's when he becomes a true superhero. This is a very detailed map that Joseph Campbell's hero's journey gives us, and you can study it. I'm giving you an example of it, which is divided into 3 acts. Then your story gets divided into the act of separation. Act 1, when you leave the known world and you go out, as the hero goes out, looks for something. He has separated himself from the real world, the world that he knows. Then he obviously gets into that special world or the subconscious. He submerges himself in and transforms into what he truly has to become through the act 2. The supreme ordeal is the inner conflict. And then you go up from there. And finally, in act 3, you are unifying. Just to give you an idea, guys, this is Joseph Campbell's look. But there is so much more. I have to say this because having lived in India for the past year and a half, that you learned from things like Natya Shastra. There is a lot more to pick up on. If you look within your own scriptures, there is a lot of information on what different kinds of plots can exist, what different kinds of myths, what different kinds of archetypes exist that you can explore, that are actually provided by the philosophy here. So that's the only other thing I have to say that is yet to be explored. So this is an example, but there's so much more to do. So I hope this gives you an idea of how a hero can pursue their journey throughout the story, through the known world into the unknown world, through leaving themselves from their known condition into going into the process of death and transformation, death of the old self, transformation into the new self, and then overcoming the conflict. There's a lot to back in at that moment. Sorry.
So we're gonna have an assignment, which we're gonna start here, but then you're gonna take back with you to your homes and continue. So everyone is going to create a 1-page comic book script. And if you're also an illustrator, you can take that script and go to the next level, which is creating the artwork as well, which I won't be talking in this workshop, but it's something you can do. So again, some of the basic principles that I put: what will each panel tell us? How will the panels connect to tell the entire story? That's very critical. If you have a personal story, those are often the best to start off with. If possible, text should be reduced or used sparingly. Remember, this is a comic, so you want to tell as much as you can in images. Don't go into details. Let the reader imagine between the panels, so you don't actually have to show every action from A, B, and C in a panel. You can do jump cuts when telling stories. And comic book scripts are almost like film scripts and or storyboards. I'll show you in a second what I mean. So you can use film scripts as a structure for creating this. This is a 1-page comic that a teenager did in New York City, dealing with her own issues of gender representation in the media and being a teenager as well. So that's just a 1-page comic she did. And I'm going to go through each one. And I think this is a perfect example of how to create comics, but also comics dealing with a serious topic as well. So in first panel, she talks about, and you can see literally on the screen how I wrote, or how Jade, the writer and the illustrator, wrote the description of that panel. It looks like a film script, almost like a film script. So you have panel 1, and there I use film language, medium shot. Jade is in her bedroom looking into a mirror. She's displeased with herself. Her shirt is rolled up to reveal her hairy arms. And when I hand this to the illustrator. They interpret the shots and also the caption, which is the
Absolutely.
text that she's thinking in her head, and they interpret it and draw it out based upon the text.
And I would just like to say, as when you submit your writing and it goes through the illustration, a lot of your writing gets translated into visual elements, and you don't have to say it all after that. It's only a few words that remain after that, and that's that's what kind of happens.
And Shubha and I don't go into this, but when we create characters, and the reason why we're recommending you to stay personal, because everyone can look in the mirror and draw a character because you're drawing yourself. But when you're creating supernatural or animal characters or so forth, what we do is we create a lookbook, which is basically photos, images that we've taken off the web from our own personal photos of people and characters that we would want to be interpreted into these characters. And like Priya the character Priya was a mixture of many people, not only regular people, but also some Bollywood actors as well. So we gave the illustrator a lookbook of how we want her to look and gave all these examples, and they interpret that into the character. So here, the first panel, in Jade's comic, we learned that she's a teenager, uncomfortable with her looks and sulking in her bedroom. And then the second panel, now we start getting into the issues. Here, I use film language point of view shot. She's looking at fashion magazines. And then there's a voice bubble. Voice bubbles are different than thought bubbles, or different than narration. Then we have a caption. And the middle panel goes further into the stories as well, and the issues. Panel 3, medium shot. Jade is in her bedroom looking into a mirror. She feels uncomfortable with the way she looks. There's a caption. Here, the way she holds her two fingers, the personality she's conveying, it tells a lot about who she is. I love panel 4. It's one of my favorite panels. She's pinching her nose, and that tells a lot. And the fact that she's cross-eyed tells a lot about her personality. You can capture personality through very simple things like this. And the fact that she has a little mole on her nose. These are things that you want to bring out. Last thing you want to do is create a simple or cookie cutter character, and we learn in the caption that she's still struggling, accepting my nose, I wax my eyebrows, shave my legs, and so on. Panel 5, we learn the exact issue that's sort of prevailing. She sees all these people on TV and in magazines that are super beautiful, almost all very similar in looks and styles, and it doesn't represent who she is, and she feels depressed by that. And then channel 6 is how she deals or doesn't deal with it. And the way Jay drew her, the way she's hunched down with her hairy legs and arms, sad, it's obviously she's not dealing with it the best way she can. But the way she posed her, as opposed to showing her crying or something, is the artist's interpretation of how her as a teenager, she's dealing with it, internally going in and dealing with the emotions. So 6 panels, very simple story, character introduced, issues presented, and then how she resolves or doesn't resolve it. So let's have a discussion and talk about some ideas that you want to sort of present, and maybe we can take a few minutes, 10 minutes to sort of outline the script that you plan to write.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you. That was, I think, very crisp. And if you think about it, it covers the lifespan of storytelling. So thank you very much, Ram and Shubhra, for taking us through that. Students, do you have any thoughts? If anybody has any idea, I think this is the time to ask Ram and Shubhra if you have anything on mind.
If you're feeling overwhelmed with all the information, don't feel overwhelmed, and just maybe if you have anything coming to your mind on the kind of story you would like to tell and you don't know how to proceed, you can just talk about it. There's, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I suggest I put on my Saha's mask with Snapchat. Yeah, I mean, if you wanna act it out, put on some virtual augmented reality. Use your
Yeah, do it.
Instagram and create your own characters with that. I mean, there's many different kinds of comics. There's a very popular one where you take photos and you make a comic book out of it. You
Right.
put voice bubbles over the photos and things like that. So a lot of possibilities. And hopefully some of you will be able to create something. It's only one page comic, so it's not very elaborate that you have to go into.
Absolutely. I think the slide you had shared about how do you create one, and you've given this task. We'll probably share it with all our students once and have them reach out to us with what they've been able to do.
I think the one you had something that was very concise. It was number. Yeah.
This was the one.
Well, I'll be happy to share. I'll send a PDF of this, and people can. That's the most concise you can get.
You introduce. Let's start with just introduction, right? If you had a situation, your character was in a situation. If you had to show that in the simplest form, how would you do that? You know, if you're, that's the first step, is the introduction.
Mm-hmm.
Also creating the character. I think, how is it that you're going to create your character? How are you? I mean, I think the whole idea of a lookbook is so important when you want to have. I mean, I'm guessing yours comes from the Durga, and it has those, that kind of imagery.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the first one, because all of our illustrators, when they started working on it, they never been to India. So we had to actually explain, and they're not Indians as well. First one was a Jewish American man, and the second, the later ones were Iranian Americans. So we had to work closely with them in figuring out the characters, making authentic, and I think creating a lookbook helped out immensely. Eventually, they all went to India, so I brought them to India to experience what they drew, and they felt they really did authentically capture the culture and the people. You know.
Amazing.
And I have to joke around. I mean, these non-Indians drew Indians better than most Indians did, because if you look at Indians in comics that are drawn by Indians, they're almost westernized. You know, they look more like they look more like Arnold Schwarzenegger than they do. I guess Bollywood heroes kind of look like Arnold Schwarzenegger now as well, but in general they kind of look too Western. You know, they don't look on them.
Right. But we do have students in campus. I know they have done some fair bit of work and very interesting work. So I'm sure they'll reach out to you with that.
Sure.
We do have a couple of questions. Nikita, do you want to unmute yourself and ask?
I read the question, so.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
So the thing is now, there are things we see in our day-to-day lives. We observe some things, and like for me as a person, I want to, there are some stories and there are parts of people you want to convey, and you are not really able to decide that what parts you want to convey or what story you want to tell to those things. Like you observe those things, but you are not able to take it forward. And when it comes to illustrations, and what are the challenges you face to illustrate them?
Shubhra, do you want to start with that? And
so I think that something that is generically really good with story is deciding the point of view. Okay, that's a place that you want to start. Okay, you may have many interesting characters in your story. If you're looking, you said in your question that you wrote down that that you see in your day-to-day life different perspectives. So to start simply, I would ask you to choose one first. Okay, if you are going to pick a perspective of the the person who who is a shopkeeper down the road from your house, then that is a certain visual world that person experiences. Okay, they are seeing the morning in a certain way, they are seeing the day go by in a certain day, and they are experiencing their own conflict in a certain way. Even your conflict, they are experiencing in their way. So first step you can do is actually decide which point of view you want to tell the story from. I'm not saying that is the only point of view you will ever tell the story from, or you cannot switch the point of views, which becomes much more complicated. And I would think for comic book purposes, first step, let's figure out who is going to be your protagonist, the point of view of this person. Okay. So if you think about it, that's step one. And then we can talk about how other people come in. What is their relationship with these other people? What do they want and all that? And this is an overall general idea of, storytelling. In the comic book, it becomes concise because visual elements tell more than words.
Yeah, and there's another style called and I'm sharing the screen here,
Oh, yeah.
called graphic journalism, which uses comics and sequential art to tell real life stories of people. So these are journalists that also draw as well. And let me just show you an example. So they would literally be doing interviews and drawing on the spot. So obviously they have an exceptional talent in drawing. They're not taking the stories or taking photographs back
Yeah.
home and then interpreting. They're literally drawing as they're talking and getting the story told. So these are called graphic journalists, and where they tell stories through comics and panels, as opposed through video or through articles. That's something to explore. I'm not getting into it in this one, but that's something to explore if you really want to pursue that. There's a lot of courses that are being offered all over the world on graphic journalism and using that as a form of telling stories and reporting.
It's fascinating. Draw as you're listening to the story. Wow.
Sudhanshu also has a question. Sudhanshu?
Hello. Yes,
Go
ma'am.
ahead, Sudhanshu.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi.
Actually, my question is, sir, in comics, we didn't have that much to write. Like we have only 2, 3 clouds to write over. So, what are the illustration tips or character visualization tips that you give so that we can draw and tell story through the images rather
Mhm.
through the words?
Yeah, well, I always emphasize first is to write a script. I mean, people assume that because this is a comic or a graphic novel that people just sit down and just draw, and the story comes out. It is never that case with the best comics are the ones that are thoroughly scripted and planned out before you even reach the illustrator. And when it comes to finding that right illustrator, or if you're the illustrator yourself, those are the big things you have to ask. Am I going to do my own illustrations, or am I going to hire someone else? And that, I believe, is where script is very critical, because the script is what conveys the language that the illustrator needs to turn those characters and the stories into images. I spend almost a whole year in researching and creating scripts before I give it to the illustrator, and the illustrator might spend about 3, maybe 6 months maximum in creating a 40-page comic book. So there's, like I said, a lot of preparation, a lot of planning has to go into that.
If you're saying that you want to, there's not enough to write in a comic book because it's a distilling process. You start with more, you put in as much as you can, then you come down to that point. Because if you're going to say that, he had all these thoughts in his head as he walked inside the door, that is very easily shown in visual elements. But that visual artist is going to want to know that information. They need to know that before they draw that yes, the look on this person's face has to be of someone tense, someone stressed while they are standing at the door. Otherwise, they could just be standing at the door with a smile on their face or with anger or with distress. Who knows?
Yeah, and what is the door? Is it what kind of door is it? You have to explain
There you
this.
go.
Like, is it locked? Is it a big door, a small door? I mean, is there obstacles after opening the door? These are all things you have to kind of talk it out with the illustrator when you're creating it.
Hope that answers.
Sorry, I was just saying that it's also what is the character, where is he from, what's the background.
Right.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I recommend also when writing the script, which is also a film language thing, is writing a background story, a backstory of the character. Where do they come? This, which might not actually be in the comic, but writing a backstory helps you understand your character better. Where do they come from? What are their hopes, wishes, challenges? Did they have? What are their parents like? What were they like as teenagers? All of these things kind of help in creating who the character is now.
Absolutely. Okay, I don't see any more questions. If any of you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, and I will make sure that I send it to Ram and Shubhra. And I hope this session has opened up a lot of avenues for you. There's so much that can be done just in terms of storytelling, in terms of animation, scripting, the technology behind it. So thank you so much. I do see one more question. Do you want to take that?
Ma'am, is there a way some of these stories can help us relate better to each other or understand more about life? That's for you, Shubhra.
That's the goal of any storyteller. Is there a way, is the question that we ask before we start the work, right? And we keep asking throughout the work. What I am doing, will it help someone relate or be understand more about life? Will it help me understand more about life? Is a question, is a very good question, but that's something that the writer has to have in their mind when they begin and as they keep going through the process. If you're asking my personal opinion, I can obviously give you my personal opinion of how I feel that it does. But I think that you've asked a question that kind of starts the process and stays throughout the process. So, yes, and I believe the hope is that they do. Your work should answer that, that yes, they do. That I do understand something about life a little bit better because of this story.
Absolutely. That was bang on, I think, Shubhra. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Ram. Thank you, Shubhra. And
Thank you.
Priya's mask looks amazing. I'm sure the students will look it up after this session. Some of them probably would already have because we had sent out the creators. And it's been very, very inspirational. So thank you for joining us today. Ram, I know it's very early in the morning for you.
All right.
Snowstorm morning.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. And we really look forward to seeing you at the campus sometime.
Definitely.
Because the kids would want to definitely meet you once.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining. Thank you, students. Thank you so much for today.
All the best. Take care.
Keep safe, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.